going to talk about cost, chapter 3, number 30, right there. And the question is operating leverage. So you remember operating leverage kind of answers the question, if sales increase by X%, then operating income will increase by X% times the operating leverage. And so if my operating leverage is 5 and my sales increase by 10%, then my operating income will increase by 5 times 10%. All right, so this has got, first we have break even. So again, let's get some information down. I don't have it over here, so you go ahead and write it down. They plan to sell carpets for $950 each, so $950 is my selling price. The company will purchase the carpeters for $760 each, so that's my variable cost, selling price, variable cost. Actually write it on your piece of paper. With the privilege of returning any unsold units for a full refund. So that just truly makes them variable. If I had to keep them, whether I sold them or not, notice I might have $950 times the number sold, and then $760 times the number purchased, and these two numbers wouldn't be, X wouldn't be the same for sold and purchased, but this makes it the same for sold and purchased. So I have alternatives, fixed costs of $74.10 or 10% of total revenue earned during the sales period. So if you think about that, 10% of total revenue, 10% of $950 is $95. So I also, under option 2, I have a variable cost of $95. Okay, so I want the break-even point for option 1 and 2, and the break-even is fixed cost divided by contribution margin. So my fixed costs are $74.10 divided by contribution margin, which is selling price minus variable cost. So $950 minus 76, and I get 39. You can use the solver for Excel to do it. I might quickly go through that when we get it done. But under option B is fixed cost divided by contribution margin. In option B, I have 0 fixed costs, so I could quickly go to the end and get 0. But my contribution is $950 minus 760 minus 10% of sales, or 95. And so again, I have break even of 0, which makes sense because if I can return them all and don't sell anything, I make $0 by selling nothing. Number 2, at what level will they earn the same operating income? So all I'm going to do is set these operating incomes equal to themselves. So remember, under option A, I have sales, variable costs, and fixed costs. So sales times the number sold minus 760, variable cost times the number sold minus fixed costs of 74.10 should equal operating income, but in this case, my operating income is going to be the same under both, so I'm going to set these equations equal to each other. So in the second sense, it's 950 minus 760 minus 95, all 3 x's. Okay, and so I can simplify those, and I get 190x minus 74.10 equals 95x, so I've just simplified this side and then this side. So then, bringing this over here, I have 95x. Notice that's 190 minus 95, not this 95. It's just a coincidence, it's the same. So 190 minus 95x is 95x is 74.10. X equals 78. So basically this is very, very simple algebra. At this point, you should understand simple algebra. If not, there's Khan Academy and things you can do to brush up on your algebra. So 78, so then the question is, okay, I want to choose one if it's, what happens if I go to 79, or what happens if I go to 77? And you can just honestly, if you can't see it, just plug 79 into each of these and see which one is better, because I know I'm indifferent at 78. So at 79 and above, I ought to prefer one option, and so notice that I want to have the 190 added to my net income. So I have option 1, and if it's 77, I need option 2, because basically 77 and below, I need option 2. And if you can't see that, just plug the numbers in to the equation. Calculate the degree of operating leverage. The degree of operating leverage, remember your income statement is Picture this vertically. Sales minus variable cost is contribution margin, minus fixed cost is operating income. Okay, so you simply take your contribution margin divided by operating income. So let me scroll that over. So if you're going to solve for option 1, I want sales at 65. Okay, so my sales 950 times 65 minus 760 times 65. 950 minus 760 times 65, which is your X, gives you a contribution margin of that divided by operating income. So I take 12,350 minus fixed costs of 7410 gives me operating income is 2.5. Under the other one, it's 1, which should make sense. Because basically what we're saying, if sales increase by 10%, then operating income will increase by 2.5 times 10%. Okay? If sales increase by 10%, then operating income will increase by 1 times 10%. So in this case, 10%. Okay? So this one would be 25% here, this one's 10%, which should make sense because if all your money is coming from sales minus variable costs, then it should be a 1-to-1 ratio. All right, I'm going to pause this. Okay, and if you do this on Excel, you can use the solver function. And the solver function on Excel is under data, and you may have to add it in to get that. But you should also get the same 37, oops, that's the wrong problem, 39. But when you want them to be the same, notice I've used the solver and I have plugged them into the formulas and set the difference equal to 0. Okay, already done that. This part here on your handout just basically proves, read, if sales increase by 10%, then operating income will increase by degree of operating leverage times 10%. So 2.5 times 10% is 25%, and 10% times 1 is 10%. So this just kind of is a check, does that actually work? So I just plugged in numbers to see if it did increase by 25% and 10%, and it does. So hopefully that helps you out. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to insert the solver function, and I have my screen capture software. Didn't put my square up high enough, but right above this arrow is a little thing that looks like that. Okay, so you're gonna, up here above this, you're gonna click the button that looks like this. Come on. Okay, then you're gonna go to more commands, and then under more commands you're gonna go to add in, and down here at the bottom you're going to see Excel add-ins, and click go. There it goes, and notice I've already got them added on my computer. If you're at home, this analysis toolpack is a good one. You can run regression on it, but we're wanting the solver add-in, so you're going to click OK. And then if you go to data, the solver is right there. Data analytics, if you ever want regression, you're going to go in there and select regression for that. But we aren't doing regression right now. So let me clear this thing. Okay, and so basically I have typed in the information. I've typed in this. And then let's see, go type in, let's say 100. Oops. Where I was there. 100 there. Okay, and so you want to make sure that your formulas work here. And so these should all be formulas. So I'm going to hit Control and tilde. Tilde is that little squiggly line. Looks like that. Less maybe bumpy. More like that. Which is on the key next to the 1. Okay, so you have to have formulas in there. Notice you also have to have a formula in this one. I'm going to go back, hit Control tilde again, and keep going back and forth. Come on, listen to me. Okay, they updated this software and I'm not really sure if it's better because I cannot get it to work. Okay, so make sure that this cell right here is plus this cell because I want these two numbers to be equal. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my Data tab in Solver. And in Solver, it has this. Okay, and your objective here is what you want to be. So I have put a difference column. The only reason I have this difference column here is to run my solver. And so I want this number to be this number, the same exact one. So I want to change the units. I already know what it should be as long as I have my information correct. But I think one flaw I had in this one because I made it quick is notice my variable costs are 760 and 760, and then I put the 10% commission over here. Kind of in hindsight, I wish I'd drawn another line for variable costs or put 760 plus $95 in here, or added 760 and 95 and had my variable cost pulling twice over here. But I do have it under variable cost. I just don't have it over here. So this commission is 10% of that number. All right. So basically what I want is I want this to be 0 because I want this and this number to be the same. Now I also want this number and this number to be the same. So that's why it's important that for this one I put plus B2, which is, it's going to be the same number as that. Okay, so for instance, watch, if I change this to I keep changing this thing, so I'll come back to it. But anyway, all right, so I want to set my objective. My objective is this cell, and I want it to be a value of 0, and I want it to keep checking until it changes by changing this number. Okay, so set objective I7 right there to a value of 0 by changing cells this one. Okay, and again, it won't work if there's anything but formulas in here. So I'm going to solve it. Tells me okay, and notice it says 78. Okay, so you can look at number 2 that we solved because number 2 was asking about where is the two are equal. Okay, so I kind of skipped number 1, the break even. But so now I'm just going to do this one. I'm going to go back to my solver. I want to set this one equal to a value of 0 by changing the number I sell. So I'm ignoring option 2. Option 2 is irrelevant. Okay, so it's okay. And so notice, look at your answer when we did it by hand is 39. Okay. All right, so degree of operating leverage, it looks, degree of, forget, let me pause. Okay. So in the degree of operating leverage, it says 65 units. Come on, you silly thing. Okay, so notice in degree of operating leverage is just contribution margin divided by operating income. So I brought those down here. Again, I didn't need to do this formula again. I could have just made this cell that divided by that. Okay, so contribution margin divided by operating income, contribution margin divided by operating income. So this one's 2.5 and 1. And all I did down here is copy this down again and said, okay, does it work? So I increased sales by 10%. And if I increase sales by 10%, then I should have increased, this number should be 10% times 2.5 or 25% more than that number. So So that's why I repeated it so I didn't lose my original number. So the first thing I did was took 65 times itself plus 10% more. So I got 72, and same thing here. So if I solve for 72, I get 6175. Okay, so now I have to know what percentage of increase is that. So the increase is 1235. 1235 divided by 4940, because you always divide by what it was previously to see how much it increased. And indeed it does increase by 25%. And notice this one went from 6175 to 13585. So it increased by 7410. And what did I do wrong here? Let me pause. So what I did wrong here was I somehow changed that number. Okay, so in Excel, you're only as good as your formulas are. There we go. I had the wrong cell formula, so I had this cell formula wrong. So I didn't have it subtracting, so I probably need to fix the one online, but I already have my handwritten notes on it. So that just proves that it does indeed increase by 25%.